The number of articles written about Adolf Hitler's sex life nearly outnumbers those about his political career and war crimes. Why, of all things, there is an obsession with the Führer's sexuality. Some believe his sexual preferences are related to his behavior on the world stage. Others simply want to know what it's like to be in a relationship with one of history's most ruthless dictators. But he kept his personal life private. He was quoted saying, "I am married to Germany." Most people are unaware that he had some romantic relationships with Eva Braun, resulting in a marriage that lasted only 36 hours. Hitler's marriage to Eva Braun was only revealed after his death. What happened to her? Was she madly in love with Hitler? What role did she play in the Nazi Party? And how well did she know about Nazi atrocities? Before I tell you that, here's a quick reminder that subscribing is free. Eva Braun is well known as Adolf Hitler's mistress turned wife. She was born on February 6, 1912, in Munich, Germany. She was raised in a humble, lower-middle-class family. Friedrich Braun, her father, was a teacher, and Franziska Kronberger, her mother, was a tailor. Ilse Braun and Margaret Gritty Braun were her siblings. Eva was just 17 years old when she first met Hitler. She was 23 years younger than Hitler at the time. During that time, Eva was working with Heinrich Hoffmann, Hitler's photographer, where she worked as both an assistant and a model. She also learned to use cameras and processing of photographs, making her the photographer who took most of the shots of Adolf Hitler that are now in the public archives. Eva was not a member of the Nazi political party and did not play any role in German politics during her life. Eva had to constantly comply with Hitler's demand that she leave the room whenever serious political subjects were being addressed. She was more interested in fashion, movies, and sports than she was in politics. She was politically apathetic. Eva and Hitler had a connection that was loaded with complexities. When Eva first got in touch with him, he was still residing in Munich with his half-niece, Geli Raubal. Even though Hitler and Geli were related, it is often believed that they had a love relationship. Unfortunately for him, in September of 1931, Geli took her own life by shooting herself in the head with his revolver in the flat that they shared in Munich, bringing an abrupt and tragic end to their love. At the time, Hitler was in Nuremberg. Geli's death is claimed to have devastated him because many believe that she was his only love. The relationship between Hitler and Eva did not begin until after Geli had passed away. Due to his refusal to show her any public display of affection throughout their relationship, there was very little romance between the two of them. He did not want to be seen in public with Eva, and the people who did see her with Hitler at their home never thought that the two were involved in a romantic relationship. Many of the guests that came to visit them in their home referred to Eva more as the hostess than as Hitler's girlfriend. Still, his attention to Eva was lacking, and she knew it. She wanted more from their relationship, but Hitler was dedicated to his politics, and it's possible that he just never felt the same way for Eva as he did for Geli. Despite this, she still had high hopes for them. Hitler wanted to keep his single persona in the eyes of the German people. He believed that doing so would show the German people that he was concentrating solely on Germany and nothing else in the world. He believed him being a single man contributed to his popularity, not only with the general public, but also with German women. He felt that getting married or having a public relationship would hurt his popularity among German women because he wanted to use his popularity with the women for political gain and wanted to exploit his popularity with the women. Because of this, he and Eva were never seen in public together as a couple. The only time they were photographed together in a public setting was in 1936 during the Olympics, when Eva happened to sit close to Hitler. All other photographs of the two were taken in their private home. Eva attempted suicide twice to get Hitler's attention, once in August 1932 and again in May of 1935. Eva shot herself in the chest with her father's revolver in her first suicide attempt. She survived the gunshot with more of Hitler's attention as a result. It's believed that the two fell in love around the end of 1932. Hitler became increasingly attached to Eva, but he still did not let her be seen with him in public as a normal lover would. Eva was forced to remain in the shadows, unnoticed by the German public. Eva's second suicide attempt was in 1935, when she overdosed on sleeping pills. The reason behind her second suicide attempt was again Hitler's failure to make time for her in his life. In an attempt to improve their relationship, Hitler bought a few residences for Eva. One of them was a 3-bedroom apartment for her and her sister in Munich. This is where she spent most of her time. Hitler also bought them a villa in Bogenhausen. Because of her affair with Hitler, Eva enjoyed a high-class lifestyle. Gretti, Eva's sister, also profited enormously from Hitler's kindness to them. She eventually married SS Gruppenführer Hermann Fegelein, who worked as Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler's liaison officer as part of Hitler's staff. Hitler used this marriage as a reason to allow Eva to attend public gatherings by introducing her as Fegelein's sister-in-law. Although Hitler was unable to present Eva with the type of romanticism seen in movies, he did love her. It has been reported that Hitler was always anxious when Eva was engaged in athletic activities because he was worried about her safety. He was also concerned when she went out and was late for their afternoon tea at the house. Hitler also specified in his will that Eva would receive a yearly salary from his inheritance until her death. These gestures reflect a man who cared, despite his reluctance to express his feelings for her. Both historians and others who lived during the time of Adolf Hitler have different explanations for why he was drawn to Braun. According to Peter Longerich's biography, the Führer chose Braun to stop people near to him from speculating about the reasons for his single status. Carmencita von Wrede, a Bavarian noblewoman and close friend of Hitler's, said that he chose Braun above others because she was lower class like himself. Perhaps more importantly, she was ignorant and uninterested in Hitler's politics. Hitler wanted to be completely free, said Reinhard Spitzi, an SS officer who met Braun numerous times. Hitler preferred a typical housewife who cooked and cleaned for him, rather than a woman who would debate with him on political matters or try to impose her influence on others. And unlike others, Eva Braun did not participate in politics, according to Spitzi. Even as Hitler's companion, Braun's interactions with him were strictly domestic. She spent most of their time at the Berghof swimming and skiing, as she anxiously awaited his return from the big city. Intense arguments would break out between Hitler and Braun whenever he failed to give her proper attention during his occasional visits. These confrontations would typically finish with Braun crying and Hitler yelling at her. Braun spent most of her time exercising, pondering, reading cheap novelettes, watching romantic movies, or obsessing about her beauty. Her devotion to Hitler was unwavering. After she'd survived the July 1944 coup plan, she sent a passionate letter to Hitler saying, "From our first encounter, I pledge to follow you everywhere, even till death. I live only for your love." When the Russians were getting closer and closer to Berlin in April of 1945, Braun joined Hitler in the Führer bunker. Despite his commands, she refused to go, insisting to others that she was the only person who would remain faithful to him till the end. She would always say the same thing to her close friends: better that 10,000 other people die than that he be lost to Germany. Eva traveled from Munich to Berlin in defiance of Hitler's desires to be with him as the war came to a close, and it became apparent that Germany would be losing. Eva continued to stand behind Hitler despite the growing threat posed by the Soviet assault. Hitler was moved by Eva's unwavering support for him, and as the moment of invasion came closer, he decided to marry Eva as a way to show his appreciation for Eva's devotion. On the evening of April 28 to 29, 1945, Hitler and Eva were married in a small civil ceremony. She was now Eva Hitler. The morning following the wedding, Hitler had a simple breakfast celebration for himself and his new bride. On April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun bid farewell to their staff members and members of Hitler's inner circle. At that point, the Soviet invasion of Berlin was in full swing. Both Eva and Hitler made their way to the underground bunker in Berlin, where Hitler ended his life by shooting himself in the right temple with a handgun, and Eva ended hers by swallowing a cyanide capsule. Members of Hitler's inner circle found their dead bodies. According to Hitler's orders, the bodies were brought to the garden behind the Reich Chancellery, where they were burnt. The Soviets were the ones who eventually discovered the bodies, and they later had Hitler's dentist verify the identities of the burnt remains. When she took her own life, Eva was just 33 years old. Although she did get her wish of finally being married to Hitler, it was only for a few hours. Her passion for Hitler resulted in nothing but suffering, and in the end, death for her. It didn't appear to bother Eva, given that she had tried to kill herself in the past because the man she loved didn't pay her enough attention. The rest of Braun's family got through the war. Her mother, Franziska, passed away in January 1976 at the age of 96. She had spent the entirety of her life in a small farmhouse located near Ruhpolding, Bavaria. Her father, Fritz, died in 1964. On May 5, 1945, Gretty became a mother for the first time, giving birth to a girl whom she named Eva. Braun's elder sister Ilse was not part of Hitler's inner circle. She married twice and died in 1979. Eva's mental health would be seriously questioned in today's world. Was she a lady truly in love, or a woman suffering from serious, undiscovered mental illnesses? Braun had the opportunity to survive the war, but she chose not to. According to Hitler's secretary, Traudi Junge, Braun did not want to live in a world without the Führer. Like so many other Germans, she had become pitifully and fatally devoted to him. Also, an interesting fact that Eva's underwear was put up for auction and sold for over $3,000 is both intriguing and pretty unusual. A rather odd historical collectible to have in one's possession. For more than 13 years, Eva Braun was Adolf Hitler's secret mistress. She lived in the shadow of one of history's most hated individuals, and was his long-term mistress and momentary wife for a couple of days, accompanying him for much of his time as Führer. While Eva Braun's name will forever be associated with the Nazi Party and the Third Reich, her true background is less widely known. She is still seen as a naive, apolitical appendage to the ruler. She was only publicly disclosed after her death in 1945, when she and Hitler committed suicide in a Berlin bunker. She was enjoying life away from the horrors of the Second World War, yet in the grip of one of its most heinous figures before the Nazis' demise. Today, we will be sharing with you the lifestyle of Eva Braun. Here's a quick reminder that subscribing is free. She was one of 3 sisters and was born in 1912 to parents who belonged to what was at the time considered to be the lower middle class. Braun had her primary education in a Catholic lyceum in Munich. Later, she attended a business school at the convent of the English Sisters in Simbach am Inn for 1 year. While there, she got average marks but showed a talent for athletics. She failed to set herself out academically in any way. She didn't stand out from the crowd at all. Her most cherished activities included dancing, gymnastics, watching Hollywood films, and reading love novels, which influenced her greatly. After completing her formal schooling, she found work with Heinrich Hoffmann, the photographer who would go on to play a pivotal role in the process of taking Hitler's official pictures. She worked as a store assistant and general assistant at first, but she quickly developed an interest in photography on its own. She was a bourgeois teenager from Munich, Germany, and she was uninterested in politics until one fateful morning in 1929 when her employer, a devout Nazi in whose photography studio she worked, asked her to run out to buy some beer in Leberkasse, a Bavarian meatloaf for an important guest who had just walked in. Braun's life changed forever after that event. Braun, who was just 17 years old at the time, returned with the food and drink and presented it to the guest, who had blue eyes and a scruffy mustache. His name was Adolf Hitler. Being Hitler, he ordered Martin Bormann, an official of the German Nazi Party and the head of the Nazi Party Chancellery, to investigate her family history and verify that she was descended from pure Aryan blood. Hitler made his move when Bormann reported that she did not have any Jewish ancestry in her family, which meant that she was not quote-unquote tainted with Jewish blood. He began to show her a lifestyle that she had only seen in the movies or read about in love novels by taking her to the opera and the movies in his luxurious Mercedes. After just a few years had passed since their interaction, Braun, who was blonde, blue-eyed, and slim-hipped, had risen through the ranks to become the First Lady of the Third Reich. Hitler provided her with a residence that was fully staffed, with a maid, as well as a luxury Mercedes that came with a driver. At long last, she was living the life she had dreamed. Eva became completely devoted to him, but Hitler's main priority was always his image in public. Thus, he paid little attention to Eva. He was under the impression that German females held him in such high regard that a marriage or even the discovery of a mistress would cause a decline in their love for him. She was so completely smitten with the mustachioed lover that she made regular complaints to Dear Diary that he wasn't spending enough time with her as he was busy rearming Germany and drafting the pernicious Nuremberg laws. An attempt at suicide to grab his attention did wonders for the issue. Hitler provided her with a luxurious apartment in Munich that had embroidered bedding, a maid, special supplies of freshly looted Ukrainian bacon, and a cellar stocked with Moet and Chandon, a fine French wine. She grew to look forward to sitting over these small lunches and dinners the most with Hitler, and it eventually became her favorite time of the day. She did not place much importance on the dish itself. Cooking was done by someone else. Braun wasn't the one slaving away in the kitchen making the dumplings. It was the social recognition she hankered after. At these dinners, she could assume her proper position as the heroine of the national spectacle that she was otherwise excluded from, and she could bask in her role as, to borrow from her ecstatic diary, the mistress of Germany's and the world's greatest man. Despite the generosity of her boyfriend, Braun was forced to put up with the indignity of not being permitted to be seen with him in public places. Hitler intended to present an image of himself as a solitary warrior, devoted to the belief that Germany should come first in everything. The only time Braun was permitted to appear on his arm in the capacity of chief consort was when she was serving in the role of host to his inner circle, which often took place at their private alpine hideaway, the Berghof. There, she blossomed. When Adolf Hitler bought the Berghof in 1933, it was only a small vacation residence perched on top of the Obersalzberg mountain. The work of the alteration started in 1934 and was finished in 1936. The old home had a sizable wing extended upon it, and various outbuildings were built in addition to the main structure. The entire region was surrounded by a fence, and the Nazi Party bought and demolished the remaining homes on the mountain. While Braun and the other members of the entourage were at home, they were unable to communicate with the outside world. Houses were built for Martin Bormann, Hermann Göring, and Adolf Hitler's SS officer Speer inside the compound. Heinz Linge, who served as Hitler's valet, wrote in his memoirs that Hitler and Braun had 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms at the Berghof that were connected by doors, and that Hitler would spend the majority of the evenings alone with Braun in his study before they went to bed. She would drink wine while dressed in a dressing gown or housecoat, but Hitler would have tea. Even inside the confined space of the Berghof, there was little evidence of affection or physical contact between members of the household. Braun played the role of hostess among the frequent guests, even though she was not actively involved in the management of the household. She was the only guest who asked friends and family members to accompany them on their visits. But even though she constantly smiled into the camera and spun around in her Ferragamo heels and diamond jewelry, Braun was unable to hide the feelings of loneliness and uncertainty that engulfed her. Albert Speer, Hitler's star architect, was one of the few people who saw through her fragile front. Speer developed what he referred to as a fondness for this unhappy lady who was so strongly committed to Hitler. Speer, who was a frequent visitor to the Berghof, recalled the tradition of having pre-lunch drinks on the terrace in his memoirs. The woman would stretch out on reclining seats, and waiters in liveried dress with exquisite manners would bring them champagne, cognac, vermouth, soda, and fruit juice to drink. When it was revealed that Hitler was going to be there, everyone in the group would get excited. After keeping his visitors waiting for hours, the Führer would finally show up looking pudgy and friendly, playing up his dear leader role by asking about the well-being of everyone's children. Then he would lead the way to dinner alone, not with Eva on his arm. However, whenever they ate together, she would always take the seat on his left. This was the happy time in her life. A German woman named Gertrude Weisker contacted Knaus, a German film script writing professor and author of 8 novels, and told her, "Because I am Eva Braun's cousin, I have a lot of information to share with you." She did, and the result is fascinating, if grueling, partly true fiction about the last months of Braun's life as told by her cousin Marlene. Marlene, a naive 20-year-old, was delighted when her attractive, elder 32-year-old cousin Eva asked her to visit. Eva was lonely and almost entirely secluded at the Führer's mountaintop retreat, the Berghof, where the servants treated her with disrespect since she was a mistress, not a wife. She had little prestige other than being Hitler's lady. She was never permitted to attend official events. Marlene's alpine holiday had an unusual plan. Her tour guides were SS men. Eva wasn't even there to welcome Marlene on the Berghof's extremely steep front steps. And politicians like Chamberlain before her, the girl succumbed to the Berghof's malicious structure. She compared its aura to James Bond film sets she saw many years later. the bad guy's luxurious lair. Soon after, Marlene's opinion of Eva's image changed, and she began to be cautious of a depressive who was totally invincible in the art of nursing grievances. Eva's existence depended primarily on Hitler's sporadic visits or phone calls, and as the war progressed for Germany, it became clear Eva was insane with something not quite right about her eyes. The younger cousin respectfully removed herself from them, the Nazis, and moved into the tea house on the property, where she found a horrific secret. Her life was in danger not just because of the sexual demands of a high-ranking Nazi official, but also because she had to comply with those demands to ensure her survival. How much was Eva Braun aware of the camps that Hitler was running and the crimes he was committing? It's difficult to say for sure. She described her home as a pleasant bubble, which, although having a thin layer of skin, is immune to shame. A magnum of Moet was able to keep the bubble from bursting. At the Berghof lunches, in her dressing gown, with Hitler in his study, and eventually on the day of her wedding, which was the day before she passed away, Braun drank champagne every day and everywhere, according to Marlene. In the early hours of April 29, 1945, the wedding was held in the underground bunker where Hitler resided. While Hitler was a trembling wreck and constantly ate cake to maintain calm as the Russians closed in and Berlin fell and burned around them, Braun remained calm and faithful until the very end. The meal that was provided on April 30 was spaghetti and tomato sauce, but she did not eat any of it. She was busy changing into the Führer's favorite dress, the black one with the flowers at the neckline, according to Hitler's assistant. The newlyweds sat down on the couch together when they were finally left alone. Hitler killed himself with a gun. Because Braun was so concerned with her public image and the appearance of her body after death, she opted for a method that would cause minimal physical damage. A pill of cyanide was the last item she took before passing away. And with that, the video comes to an end. Do not forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to watch similar videos like this one.